and tabletop RPGs and fantasy sort of fiction. And I have also done some writing, which is definitely going to come up. That was I started writing towards the in the past few years, and all of the red flags I knew for art clients, it was a totally different game in writing, and it blew my mind. So yeah, it's been a varied sort of thing. I have some video game credits on Nintendo Switch and some RPG credits with companies like Moon Design that do like Call of Cthulhu and such.
Fantastic. All right, Jason Lowe, do you want to get us keep the ball rolling?
Yeah, so I am a comic artist and writer. I guess like my first big break was when I kickstarted a comic project that was featuring Toronto's newest superhero at the time, the Pitiful Human Lizard. And yeah, it was something that I was self-publishing, doing all the distribution to local comic book stores and just hustling on my own at conventions until it found a publisher, and then which helped with the distribution and production of more copies of my comic. And I'll be sharing more stories about that later on in this talk. But after that, I've recently won an Eisner Award for a Comixology original title called Afterlift, which is about a ride share to hell. And I've been doing some Marvel comics and some Star Wars stuff for IDW.
Fantastic. And Sanya, how would you describe what you do? Oh, mic on, Sanya.
A very good reminder. Mic is necessary. My name is Sanya, and basically I am an illustrator, but I'm a writer as well. So I've worked on titles from DC Comics, a little bit from Marvel. I've worked a little bit with Disney. I've worked on kind of titles like Assassin's Creed, Archie Comics, Doctor Who, just like I've been a little bit all over the place. But I've also done a lot of work for smaller scale organizations, private individuals. So I've done the whole gamut over the last like 10 plus years. And yeah, just excited to be here and share with you guys some of what I've learned, both good and bad along the way.
I'm so hyped. And I hope that everyone here can already kind of see and hear from our guests kind of introducing themselves, the range of experiences and the range of like credentials and who they've worked with and the kind of people they've worked with. Got another friend joining us. But for the format today, what we'll be doing is I'm going to ask kind of, are you afraid of the dark style? Just go around the circle and have our guests tell a story each. When their story ends, I might ask them some questions. The audience is also free to ask them specific questions about that story. We will, at the halfway mark, then move into kind of a more conversational format. Maybe we'll have some story prompts and a Q&A section as well. Yeah, for now, Shel, do you want to get us started with our first horror story? Bonus points if you title it like, and are you afraid of the dark story?
Okay, this is the story about the unwanted freelancer, which is me. So I had a friend who was working on a big collaborative project. He'd been working on it as a writer for a couple of years, and they had one artist on it, and they had realized that one person was probably not going to be able to do the literal hundreds of watercolor paintings that they wanted for this project in the time frame that they were looking for. So they had this artist on, and they sort of promoted him to be an art director, which is somebody who makes sort of broad decisions about the visual look and in theory communicates with the artists. And my friend recommended me as someone who could come on as a contract worker and help with all of those watercolor paintings. And at this point, I had produced a watercolor comic that I had kickstarted, and I had been doing watercolor paintings for other clients as well as for myself. And I had also been illustrating in that sort of industry for about 4 years. So I was really excited because it had the potential to be a long-term gig, right? Hundreds of illustrations need to be done. Maybe I'm employed for a year or two. That would be amazing. So they reached out and they said, we'd love to have you on for like a couple of trial paintings. We'll pay you per painting, and then we'll see if it's working out. We'll take you on kind of like steady work. And I was like, that sounds, I'm getting paid per painting. That sounds fair. And they got me to quote them on the painting. And I made my quote based around their requirements, which were I had to match the style of the other artist, which is no joke. That is a thing that comes up and it is not always comfortable. And I had to do everything sort of at the rate of scale. And they were insistent that these had to be done as real watercolors. They couldn't accept a digital substitute because they really needed it all to have that sort of warm paper feel. Just like, that's okay. It costs a little bit extra because if I mess one up, I have to restart, as opposed to if I'm on, the iPad, I just make a new layer and continue on with my life. So I priced them at a price that I felt covered all of that. And now looking back, I know was not that high a price. And then they said, okay, come on for these two things. We're going to add you to our Slack, which is sort of like Discord. If you've never used Slack, it's kind of like professional corporate Discord instead of being gamer Discord. And they had a couple of channels where they were discussing the art. And so they added me to the art channel and sort of we talked about what they wanted and I produced a couple of pieces for them and they paid me. And they emailed me and they were like, we'd love you to do like another couple of pieces. Which wasn't really what I was expecting. I was sort of expecting you like, come on in, open door, if they liked them. But I said, okay, I'll come on in and I'll do a couple more pieces. And I hop back into the Slack channel and I'm looking at the requirements of the pieces and I'm like, oh, I got to remember like what resolution they need and where is the Dropbox folder link and stuff. So I go into the Slack channel and I search my name. I probably shouldn't have done that because what it turned up was not messages they'd sent to me, but messages where they had discussed me as a potential freelancer and how they felt about my rates, which were certainly too high, and they were very concerned if I was going to be qualified for this. And again, like they accepted my work, paid me for it, hired me for more work, paid me for it, and were being really, really picky, right? Like they were like, you have to match this art director's style like exactly. And I was re-inking things for them that I would then paint. And I was doing like a lot of color correction because this was a game with a ton of really deep lore that they weren't always communicating all of it in the art direction. Like the color blue meant something specific. And when you're just listing what animals you want in the scene, you might not think to mention that. So I was pretty frustrated with that. That felt pretty uncomfortable. So I didn't actually pursue that job much further. I kept taking sort of one-off illustrations from them because I had expected to have work and hadn't been searching and needed something to tide me over through the job search. And they did sort of reach out and were like, we is there anyone else, because it doesn't sound like you're very available, is there anyone else that you would recommend? And I was able to sort of connect them with other artists who they brought on, and those artists were able to negotiate that they could just do digital work in their own styles. So I left that job. I just walked out and never search your name in the Slack and also make a new channel if you're going to gossip about your freelancers before you hire them. And I'm not mad. No. I'm just a little mad. It's extremely insulting.
Still bitter. It still hurts.
I don't want to hear it. Like you can say whatever you want about me as my employer if I don't have to feel the consequences of it. If you've chosen to pay me, let's just pretend you're happy about it. Right? Let's all just go into that and pretend that. Anyways.
With something like that where you're getting like very maybe it wasn't their intention for you to see it, but you're seeing the very brunt criticism, not only about, your art, but you yourself. How do you kind of walk away from that emotionally without taking it personally?
Oh, I took it very personally for a couple of days there.
How do you handle taking it personally?
Not gonna lie. I took time off. I just stepped back and I was like, okay, I'm not rushing on these things. They don't have like desperate deadlines. This thing is going to take years to finish. So no one's going to come at me if I'm like a week late. So I'll just write an email and be like, I'm going to be a little bit late. And then I just ignored them for a week. And then I sort of calmed down and was like, well, I do still need this money. And I did the work and I connected them with a couple of people who I knew were sort of like thick-skinned, who I knew would like sort of come in and be able to like set their own boundaries better than I had apparently. And then I walked. I mean, like I knew as soon as I read it, I was like, I can't stay on this job. Right. I'm not going to, they're not inviting me on full time, and I am absolutely not going to look for that now, because I couldn't go into a full time gig with these people after reading those things. I could finish up the work I had done. I could take on a couple of pieces, but the idea of like being in weekly meetings with them, having read that, was not going to happen.
So you never had the impulse of like, well, I'll change their minds.
If I hadn't by then, it wasn't worth it. Right. Like I had come in and I thought I was pretty capable at what I was doing, and they thought I was capable enough to hire me, right? Like it's okay if they don't hire me, I don't take it personally. I'm not the right fit, but they did hire me and then got really mean about it in the archive of the Slack channel. So yeah, they didn't seem worth it, right? Like it was a
Absolutely.
job, but
No,
it wasn't the
absolutely
only
they don't.
job. Yeah.
I think there's often that inclination, especially as a new creator, to kind of just roll with it, or like, I guess I deserve that, and just push through. But I think you did the smart idea of like, okay, well, bye.
Yeah, like what's my exit strategy? And it wasn't instant. I didn't like email them and be like, sorry, goodbye. I never really called them out on it. I didn't want to have that fight. Right? That was like, that would be labor of me like teaching them that they're being jerks. And like if they didn't know it, then I'm not gonna succeed at teaching it to them. Right? They were in their own little universe. So, and clearly when they realized how much more art they needed, they stopped having the same kind of standards with the new freelancers that they hired, and let them do things their own way, and got the project finished. And I'm very happy for them, but I also wouldn't work with them again, any one of them individually or together.
No, I absolutely agree. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that pain.
My pleasure.
From there, Sanya, do you want to go next? Because I know Jason's got a banger, but it might be a little bit long. But I want to hear Sanya's.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I've been out in, the environment for like 10, 12 years now. And I've run the gamut. I've had such a diversity of experiences, a diversity of clients. And especially early on in my career, I had a lot of, colorful experiences. And they got less and less the more experience I got, because, as Megan, I'm sure, is going to expound on later, you start to see the red flags like from a mile away. So the story I want to share today is about probably one of my more, like looking back, more entertaining, although extremely frustrating clients. Me and my husband still chat about this one all the time. And so I'm going to call this client Mary. And Mary was an up-and-coming, actually moderately established fashion designer working out of New York and France. And she was constantly going back and forth. And I don't know how she got my portfolio. How does anyone get anything? I have no idea. But her and her team got in touch with me. And, right away, one major thing, and we could have a whole other panel about this, is that I was working with an editorial team where they all thought they had approval rights on everything. And that's just, So I thought I was about to say her real name. I thought Mary was going to be the one approving stuff, but no, she was flying back and forth between her two cities way too often. So I just had the one conversation with her, and I was dealing with her three very competitive assistants. So they were very competitive amongst each other. And so they almost thrived in an environment where they were not communicating that well. So here I am, the artist. So here's what I was hired to do. It had nothing to do with the fashion design aspect exactly. Mary had developed a collection around a New York DJ. Okay. So the DJ was the muse for the collection. And I was to create a comic story where the DJ would be saving impoverished women in the sex work industry during the day while DJing at night.
Coming on really strong.
No, it gets better, Megan. So she would be doing this all while wearing the fall collection, as you do. And this was, by the way, set in a dystopian Blade Runner, this is a quote, Blade Runner-esque future. And I would be executing this phenomenal tale in 6 pages. Yeah. And I just remember thinking there's like so much to unpack here. I'm like, right away, this is in poor taste. Like, this is really in poor taste. And I very, like, I was in the middle of my career when this happened. And like, right away, I'm like, this is, you know, the conversations around sex work weren't even happening yet at that time. But even at that time, I'm like, there's a lot here that's not quite right, you know? So I gently encouraged them that this particular narrative would be very difficult to capture with all of the necessary nuance in 6 pages, no matter how talented I'd like to think I am. So that's the first half of my tale for you. Now, remember, so they obviously have a very grand idea of what can be accomplished in 6 pages. And so you can imagine what working with this team of 3 competitive, you know, developing fashion designers was like. And the funniest part of all was that they had an idea for an aesthetic in their mind, but didn't really appreciate how it would look like on the page. So just to give you an example of some of the edits I went through. Initially, I was told there should be, you know, more diversity. And I'm like, you know, I'm already fairly diverse. I have a sense for this, that there should be diverse. But I'm like, okay, that's a good reminder for everyone that there should be a lot of diversity. I took that as a positive cue, which I probably should not have, because the second comment was that everyone had to be skinnier. I was just drawing everyone too robustly. I thought I was drawing just normal people, but no. So I sent it in, and assistant number 2 is like, skinnier. And I'm like, okay. So I mean, I'm like cutting and pasting and marqueing and like just transforming the hell out of this. And I'm like, now? And they're like, skinnier. These are models, for God's sakes. And I'm like, okay, you did look at my work beforehand, right? I mean, not to say that I'm you know, that I have as many diverse body types as I should in my work, but even still, it was ridiculous, right? I'm like, at this point, she's going to disappear off that runway. And then partway through, you know, assistant 3 comes in, is like, more cigarettes. There's just got to be more cigarettes. Everyone should be smoking. And I'm like, are you guys caught in like a sort of like 80s aesthetic here of what you think cool is? Like, cigarettes stopped being cool when I was a kid, you know, like they're certainly not cool now, to have every one of these extremely skinny people smoking. Anyway, that's I want to share one more small detail. Rihanna was really big at this time. Like, she's big already, but she was really, really hot at the time. And so they were like, she has to have tattoos like Rihanna. And I'm like, okay, you know, Rihanna's tattoos are cool. Why not? You know? So I, you know, being a stickler for accuracy, I put in the hand tattoos, and, you know, because she was DJing, keep in mind. So, you know, the hand tattoos were very prevalent. And I guess once they actually saw the tattoos represented, they're like, that's too much tattoo. And I'm like, okay. You know, we're on like edit 50 at this point. Like, my soul has gone out the window. I can't even believe this experience is happening. Anyway, in the end, like I said, it was more hilariously frustrating than demoralizing frustrating. It's kind of like, you know, being in a Wizard of Oz situation. And my husband and I still, you know, sometimes we'll look over at each other and be like, more cigarettes. There needs to be more cigarettes. In summary, I did the best I could. I think my biggest win on that project was having them decide to step away from the sex work storyline, which I felt would be, again, a little callous for the, you know, the DJ by night, the savior by day narrative. But yeah, that is what I would say was my quote unquote client from hell. Not the most demoralizing one, but sure makes a great story for other artists to enjoy.
I love whenever you tell that story. It gets better every time.
I know, right? Mansoor reminded me of some of the details from the ones I forgot.
Oh, amazing. So it was a 6-page story, but with all the edits, how long were you on that project? Do you remember?
God, like, did it ever stop? Like, I was at the studio with you when I was on that project, and I feel like I was born in that story. I lived in that story, and I died in that story. I don't know, man. I don't know.
But like,
It went on too long. That's what I
yeah,
can
too
tell
long.
you. It went on too long.
Does it happen a lot where you get a client who has hired you, has contacted and reached out to you, but then they start asking for things that are absolutely not present in your work whatsoever?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I would actually say, if anything, the majority of clients I get are like that. And sometimes it's fun. Like I was approached by Archie Comics to work on Betty and Veronica Vixens, which featured Betty and Veronica on a lot of motorcycles, and vehicles are not necessarily my wheelhouse, but it was really fun. It was a really fun way to like stretch my abilities. You know, on the other hand, I've had jobs where I was working on like a Transformer style IP. And I'm like, what from my work made you think that I'm well suited to robots in disguise? But yeah, so I would say I actually get most of my stuff is still so far out of my wheelhouse. Maybe my wheelhouse is too small. I don't know.
I don't think so at all. It's for anyone who isn't familiar with Sanya's work, I would absolutely recommend you look up her website and then see how hilarious it is to hear that someone wanted her to draw robots.
I'll pop it in the chat if you want to take a look a little
That
later.
would be great, yeah. While you're doing that, Jason, do you want to start us off as well?
Okay, yeah. Let's say this is chapter 1 of a very long story with
The saga.
A saga, yeah. So, as I said before, I was self-publishing The Pitiful Human Lizard, uh, a Toronto superhero, and it was getting the same kind of buzz that a lot of other Canadian superheroes were getting. There was this period of time, about like around 2013, 2014, where news outlets were taking notice about Canadian superheroes. And this one publisher owned um, a pretty historically kind of well-known superhero, Canadian superhero, and they had their own animation, and yeah, so they have their own publishing house, and I knew some friends that were working on the superhero, and so I was excited about the idea of just having my superhero be part of the same universe of this Canadian superhero universe, and right off the bat, a friend of mine that works for the animation, and a friend of mine that works on the comic of that superhero, they both warned me about the publisher. They both told me like that. I mean, he like you got to be really careful. Like you got to really you're going in. You got to know your worth. You got to know what you really want out of this. You also let me refer you to a lawyer before you sign any contract. So I was like, all right. But they also said, like, I mean, you know, like he does follow through with like his payment or certain promises and stuff, and I was like, okay. I mean, and I was already like just like seeing the fantasy of like being able to collaborate with some of my friends that work in that publishing company, and seeing my property be part of something larger, but at the same time still maintain the rights to my character. I was only willing to just give away my publish my the publishing rights exclusively to them, as well as distribution rights to them. So I got the contract, gave it to the lawyer, and you know, when you're dealing with lawyers, like yeah, you are willing to. I mean, you have to be prepared to spend at least 500 for their time, but at the same time, you got to know what exactly you want in the contracts as well, so you can tell them specifically what you want, and they will make sure that in that contract it will say what you want. Um, So when I got all those notes put into the contract that I was given by the publisher, because of the first draft I got seemed pretty simple enough, but I like there had to be some like careful language to make sure that things were clear, because it looked like the right off the bat, the first draft looked like it was actually written not by the lawyer of the publisher, but by the publisher himself. So, having this contract reviewed by my lawyer, I was like, okay, well, like this is what I want. Like, could you make some of these changes? And already, this is where like certain things, um, like he would kind of pretend, going like, oh yeah, no problem. Like I'll make the second draft and I'll fix these things in. And I
The
forgot.
publisher would.
Oh yeah, the publisher would. And I forgot which details it was, like how many years of the rights or whatever. But there's always be like one or two things, like when he brings back the revision, and I would be like, you do have to spend your time like looking at those revisions, because I'll be like, you forgot this detail here. Could you fix that? It's like, oh, I'm totally sorry about that. Let me fix that. And it was a back and forth of like, I fixed one thing, or he fixed one thing, but he changed another thing, where it was like, okay, if I don't have the rights to this, I'll pay you only this amount or whatever. It was a lot of back and forth of like, it went back and forth maybe 5 times until things got right. But once things were right on paper, those times were like, the 30 days after I've submitted work and I was expecting payment, and I'll be like, to make sure that the publisher is good on their word by going, okay, hey, I was just wondering when I can get paid, um, and then I don't know if I should. What this thing is, this happens very constantly. I'll just say this happens very constantly, to the point where like, he would make excuses, to the point where like he would say, oh yeah, we're a brand new publishing company. We're unaware about these certain factors that, instead of like 30 days, it's going to be 60 days now, to the point where like, I've been with this publisher for legally 2 years, and they're like, okay, we're just going to pay you quarterly now. And I mean, it's really frustrating when, you're relying on that kind of income, when, you got to pay a mortgage, and pay for groceries and stuff. So it can be very stressful. So yeah, I mean, what I've learned from this experience is like, I had to be like really tough, and like, you got to like know your worth and say, well, like legally bind it, like you owe me this money that I provided you worked for. Otherwise, you're infringing on this contract. So it was a lot of just frustration, for those years working with that publisher. So that's chapter
Absolutely.
1.
Chapter 1 of Publisher Saga.
Yeah.
There's secondhand frustration hearing your story, because I know how some of this story goes, and hearing that there was so much back and forth and negotiation with the contract, and then to immediately have them disregard parts of that contract. It's like, I'm glad we spent all that time for you to just ignore it.
Exactly. There were like things, like I found, after like, there was so many things that they've missed the ball on when it came to payments, or just mistreating my property, where it's like, you got to pick and choose your battles. And there was times where like, I might not have been paid for sales at the conventions when they were selling my stuff at their table, because I know, like, I would be at the table and know firsthand, like, hey, like, first day you guys had a huge stack of my comics, end of the convention you guys sold out, like, I know you owe me this amount of money, but I don't see it in the invoice that the amount that I should be paid. So, like, you gotta fight. Okay, should I fight for, like, that small percentage of that they'll end up getting, like, a few $100s, or should I just fight for maintaining the rights to my character? Because, yeah, it was in all directions. There was a lot of things that were wrong once I got in, and I was not the only one. It's good that I was able to find other comic creators within the publishing, but that worked for that publisher to what we could share stories with, and we were all in the same boat, and we would give each other advice or like, at least get some insight of how they approach things, and we would share our own stories, just like right now.
No, absolutely. I feel like it was almost a rite of passage where almost everyone in Toronto has a story about this publisher.
Yeah.
When they first started to kind of come onto the scene, and they're kind of whining and dining you to come over, or you're interested, and you had people warning you who were already working with them, and you had people warning you saying, all right, if you want to work with them, you got to be aware of this, you got to be aware of this, probably get a lawyer. How did you feel about that? Because you have this excitement and you're like, oh, I mean, it feels like almost validating to have something like this recognize you in your work, and then suddenly almost this dog pile of like, okay, but watch out. How did that feel?
I'm still trying to remember what was some of those warning signs, like, what were, like, the other things that made me go, you know what, I'm still gonna work with these publishers. And like, it might have been like an analogy of, like, yeah, they're like the uncle that's, like, still good in their heart, but they just are pretty clumsy with their writing or whatever. So you just got to make sure that you're up on your toes when it comes to, like, the legal stuff. So, like, okay, like, I mean, I've just remembering business class in my art school, and just trying to remember, like how on guard I have to be at times. So I mean, that whole experience, it made me a much tougher business person, and less of ooh, comics is great, and like this is, like, comics is this nice fantasy land where we're and without the whole business practices, like, you gotta, like, yeah, like, business is an important part in the comic book industry, and you like, there is a certain attitude that you gotta have to make sure that you get what you're owed. Like, you gotta know your worth, is what I mean.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's also a big reason why I wanted to have this talk, is because we have students, we have people in the community, comics at large, who see comics but also see publishing especially as this land of milk and honey, where, like, oh, if a publisher recognizes me, I've made it. And having to realize that nobody cares about your career as much as you do, and you have to be accountable and you have to take care of yourself. There's one last thing I wanted to know. When you said, I thought this was interesting, when you said that the contract didn't look like it had been written by a lawyer, and instead it looked like the publisher themselves had written it. Is that something you spotted? Is that something the lawyer spotted?
I kind of noticed it myself when it's something that is too easy to understand. but at the same time, like there's got to be legal terms involved with this for a reason, because some of it can be very wishy-washy. Like very basic wording can definitely what's the word?
It leaves it too vague.
It would be very vague, where it would not touch on, like, for example, like my lawyer actually said, like, they need to be more specific when it comes to TV and movie adaptations, because that's another thing. TV and movie adaptations, like, if your property becomes a TV and movie adaptation, like, that's another separate thing that deserve its own thicker contract. But at that time, I mean, like, but for early on, you gotta, it's gotta state something about, like, all these terms will be discussed, when you cross that bridge. Like, that's a sentiment that those terms should say, and not kind of like state, oh yeah, like, you'll get this small percentage already, like, off the bat, when it's like, wait, there is no TV or movie deal yet. Like, you're not tied into, like, sure, you've been kind of producing your own animation, but like, there's a lot involved. Like, there's a lot of partners involved when it comes to TV and movies, and there were none of that to make that decision of, like, you're going to get this percentage already.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thank you for chapter 1. Shel, do you have another story that you'd like to share with us?
Oh yeah. Trying to pick which one. I really feel like both Jason and Sanya touched on some of the things that I've dealt with, though not the publisher and specifically, but just like messy contracts or contracts that are not okay. But also you brought up and Sanya brought up, like, too many cooks in the kitchen. And one of my first big illustration jobs had that problem. And so I had been sort of doing the sort of cold calling, walking around talking to different publishers in sort of the tabletop RPG world. And this fairly small publisher that was like an indie darling, like, people were like, oh, you're working with them, they make the best games. They were working on a new game, and the writer of that game, who was not on staff at the publisher, he was a contract writer, he'd sold this IP to get published by the publisher. He loved my work. And you may notice this theme going on where somebody recommends me for a job I should not be doing. Story of my life. But he loved my work, and he really wanted my illustrations on this project. And they were going to make sort of, like a one-off book, not super huge. And so the publisher emailed me, like, hey, our writer connected us with your portfolio. It looks like you might be a good fit. We'd like to have you give us a quote for all the illustrations in the book and the cover. And in tabletop RPGs, it's really rare to have a one artist book. Like, if you look at something like a D&D manual, you're going to see like 40, 60 artists listed in the front. And it's like I said, like, there's an enormous amount of art they need. And it's just very normal to try and sort of like get all your art needs met very quickly by a bunch of people, instead of sort of like getting one person to do a bunch over time. So this was a big deal to me. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get a book and this is going to be all my art. I'm going to get the cover. It would be my first cover gig in the industry at that time. And I got stars in my eyes. And so we worked out a quote, and at the time I didn't feel bad about it, but a big chunk of it was for the cover, because covers cost more. So I also sort of priced it out, knowing I was like, I'm going to get the whole book. It's all going to be me. I'm going to have this as a portfolio piece, and like, this is going to get me more jobs like this. Like, this is really worth my time. So maybe it was a little bit lower a quote than it should have been. And then the work started, and it was definitely the writer constantly emailing back to be like, oh, love it, absolutely perfect. And then the creative director emailing to be really finicky about stuff and completely deadpan, and he didn't use any punctuation, and it kind of sounded like he hated me. And the the sort of like person who did the publishing, like figuring out like printing and distribution, emailing back with opinions as well. So all three of them on every single piece I did in that book. And there was something like 30 pieces of art. And as we went on doing the interior art, and I was really working my butt off trying to make these like really good paintings, we get to this stage where they've kind of gone radio silent for a bit. And I'm still like, I still have a list and I haven't touched the cover yet. I've sent them a couple of like style thumbnails to be like, what direction do you want to go in? Do you want something graphic? Do you want something realistic? Are we going color? Do you want black and white? Because they were an indie darling and their books are very like design focused in terms of the covers are often very like sort of graphic, abstract. And I was really excited to like come in and join them on that, or to continue the type of work I was doing in the interior. So after like a month of sort of radio silence, they come back and they give me feedback on the illustrations on the interior that they're doing. And then they're like, yeah, we've decided we're not going to go with you for the cover. But we'd love it if you wanted to do an interior spread of a really technical map, which isn't really my jam or wheelhouse or a thing I knew how to do, and wouldn't cost the same as a cover, right? Not the same amount of money by any stretch. So I said, no, thank you. And I finished up what I owed them and I got the hell out of there. And I ran into them at future conventions, and the people that I thought hated me, right? They took the cover away from me. I was like, they must hate me. We're so delighted to meet me. They're like, we loved working with you. That was such a great project. You know, we really think it turned out great. We should work together again someday. And I was like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm pretty busy. See, I can't read someone from an email, but like, whew, I feel like I could have fought that more now. Right? So I'd be like, we signed a contract and the contract said this amount of money. So you don't want the cover, that's fine, but I want the check.
For sure.
But it was, like I said, my first really big sort of gig in that industry, and I didn't know what to do at all in that situation. I was just like, what is happening to me? So
I feel like though, between like both of your stories, you were the perfect role model of like, just walk away. Like,
that is my mandate. But like, I think I talked about this before we got started. Like, I work in an industry where like 90% of my clients are very small jobs. So I might be doing 2 or 3 paintings for somebody, or in this case, like it was 30 pieces and it was a big gig, but I knew I could get a couple more paintings from a bunch of other people. So I had like kind of like eggs in many baskets experience as a career. And so it very much felt like, okay, well, we'll just throw that whole basket out. Baby bathwater, the works, it's gone. I'm not messing with that. I don't want to feel that way. That's not why I got into art.
No, of course. But especially like when it comes to an entity that is well respected, like you said, it's a darling. You went in there with stars in your eyes. Like it would be such a great thing to have in a portfolio, on a resume, say like, I worked with X. And then things start to go south. I feel like a lot of people's impulse is to like, well, make it work because of blank, because they're so well respected, and because this could lead to other things. And so I'll just suffer through it.
I mean, I didn't bail on the other things that I committed to doing for them, right? I finished the job, and I think that is something that I want to keep reiterating. Like, I decided I was done emotionally long before I was done drawing, but it kind of like, it lit the path, right? Like I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to do this again, so we'll just get it done. But I haven't bailed on a client in that kind of way. I fired
Shel is
clients.
consummate professional.
Because I may think they hate me, but I don't want to give them anything to tell other people about me, right? And
Absolutely.
I will never work with them again, but that doesn't mean they'd have the same experience with another freelancer either, right? They might be very respectful to another freelancer. I have no idea.
No, and I think that's absolutely something to remember, because as we are sharing these stories, because it's necessary for illustrators and artists to share these stories about bad clients, bad publishers, bad studios, so that we can go in there with our guard up or avoid. But why that's so important is because it's small. This industry is very small, and by God, we all love to gossip. Gossip. We all love to gossip.
But it is sort of a staying safe thing, right? Thank God there were people to tell Jason to get a lawyer and look at the contract at the beginning. So many people don't have that network, and if you can connect and share these stories, we're protecting each other. And now both Sanya and I probably have contract clauses that are like, I will get emails from one person. That's it. That's all. Never more than one. And you learn that the hard way, but you can pass that on. And please, nobody else deal with that mess, because it is really frustrating, because they will contradict each other.
Sanya, do you have another story you could share with us?
God, I mean, I could go on and on and on. I worked with the same publisher that Jason was speaking about. I could go on and on about that topic. As Shel was mentioning, working with people who, as you say, will contradict each other, because that's to a certain extent human nature, right? Everyone has an opinion, and you do not want to give multiple people an opportunity to express their opinion, because you will pay for that in hours. This was actually a perfectly fine project that I just executed a month ago, but I was working with a group. I'm actually surprised this story is coming up, because they were lovely to deal with. But the reason I bring them up is because they had never hired an artist before. Whoever they had worked with before on a prior art project, I think was somebody related, or there's a family thing there. So they had never hired a professional before. And they were very sweet, very receptive. I decided to give them some free advice based on my experience in the industry. And they were, firstly, they threw me a way too high budget for the project. It was a single page, and they wanted they wanted 5,000 for one page of non-copyrighted work. And I'm like, and this was a charity organization as well, so I didn't feel like that was an appropriate price point. If Disney was handing that down, sure, by all means, send me all of your money. So I had a little chat with their whole team, and I'm like, listen, guys, let me give you some free advice on dealing with artists, because you're going to deal with artists a lot in the future, and they were super receptive to that. But I bring all of them up to say that they added me to a WhatsApp chat. And I know, right? And I think they had 6 different people chiming in on opinions for this one-page project. And I just stopped them right there. And I'm like, hey guys, I really appreciate that y'all have some thoughts on this, but I'm mostly going to be dealing with so-and-so. So feel free to send her a message and this part was key, if you think that this detail is necessary to the success of the project. And thankfully that narrowed things down. Like I said, they were great to work with. They were just new. I almost feel like there should be a YouTube series for hiring creators, just so people can understand the culture, because not everybody is malicious. Some people are just ignorant. And you'll encounter, for all of you going into your individual industries, you will encounter both. And unfortunately, you can't always tell the difference early on between those who are just ignorant and open to learning, and those who are a different type of ignorant, let's say. If I can give you guys a couple small pieces of advice on the way out of this, be wary of a multi-person editorial team, because you will pay in your blood, sweat, and tears for every single additional person you have to go through. Be a little cautious when you're dealing with really, really, really small organizations. As Shel mentioned, you'll deal with a lot of them, and some of them will be fantastic. Some of them have a lot of learning to do, and they're going to learn on you and your corpse. Beyond that, gosh, there's so much that could be said. Value yourself and your time. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. Value yourself, your mental health, your time, your resources. Again, because there's a lack of understanding about hiring artists, people don't understand what goes into it, and you have to sort of educate them with your price point. But yeah, those are the things I would want you guys to take away, and be prepared for a wild and entertaining ride.
And I think something that's so important to know is that, with all the clients we talk about, yes, there are some that are predatory, and then there are some that are malicious, and then there are some who are perfectly earnest, who just don't know any better. And that's sometimes even harder to deal with because, they're not coming from a place of, trying to, screw you over. They just don't know better. The one thing I did want to touch on about your story is that when it comes to working with a client who is foreign to your industry and is hiring someone like an artist for the first time, how often does that happen, do you find?
I think it varies a little bit it varies a little bit artist to artist because different industries are going to be receptive to different types of art styles. They'll be looking for a certain type of art style. Like let's say you're working for a company that deals in sneakers. They're probably looking for something that has a slightly more like street, kind of colorful vibe, right? Whereas if your style is like, children's illustration, you're probably not getting the sneaker company coming to you. So if your style has the ability to solve somebody's problem, they will come to you. Whether or not you are the best fit or not, they just go based on their impression. Actually, that is a piece of advice I will share with you guys too, is I would say this with almost every new job. If you've got a good communication going with the person you're working with, ask them which pieces drew them to you, so you can understand why they want to work with you. And it helps them also develop the language they need. I always give the example that some client might come to you and say, I want something like old timey, right? You'll do some beautiful cover or illustration for them, with, spurs and horses and cowboy hats. And they'll look at it and they'll say, no, this isn't what I meant. I want old timey, like bowler hats and coal mining and not coal mining but like industrial revolution and big dresses. And then you'll be like, wait, are you talking about old-timey in England, not old-timey in America? So that's what I mean, both your own reference images, the images that drew them to you, as well as reference images about their project, because a lot of people don't have the language to relate what they want. They're not artists, right? So have them give you many examples of what they want. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's always a blessing when I get approached and they're like, all right, here's a Pinterest board I've built for this project. I'm like, thank you. Yes. Shel, you made a face at this comment, so I just wanted to touch base. How often do you deal with someone who has never worked or hired an artist before?
Oh, every second goddamn job. I work in tabletop RPGs. There's 3 big companies, and then there are a million tiny companies. Some of them just work with stock art. Some of them are literally stealing art from the internet. Some of them work with artists, but they might hire a contract art director to do that for them. So they'll be like, they'll hire somebody who will then find the artist and get the art made and hand it to them. And then when they are like, oh, I just need like one piece, I guess I'll just do it myself. They don't have the experience. And then there are a lot of people making their baby come to life for the first time, because it's a wonderful industry where they're like, the amateur to pro is, the hobbyist to amateur to pro is like just kind of a smooth landscape. So if you are interested in this industry, you will be teaching people how to hire you very regularly. So I have like a checklist in my email now that is like, what size? How many rights do you want? Which pieces of mine do you want it to look like? What kind of, what do you need me to read? Which is another big thing. Like, what kind of sunk cost do I have to put in to get up to speed in your game? And like, how, this is how I do revisions. This is what your payment covers. This is the process. This is the stages you'll get, the timeline you get. And it's just this sort of like, I'm sure anybody who is an art director is sort of like, oh my God, I know all this. Thank you. But anybody who isn't, often they're like, sorry, what do you mean rights? What do you mean like buying rights? And it's like, yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to hammer that out because we need to be on the same page, because I have definitely been in conflicts that were just miscommunication with somebody who didn't have the experience in the industry to even notice that I was like, yeah, so this is like, I'm going to retain, this is like a non-exclusive, unlimited time sort of printing, but I'm going to retain the rights to sell this again. And they're like, sorry, you're going to what? I was like, well, at this price. Yeah, it's regular. And then the only clients I've had to fire are people who have never hired an artist before. And I have fired a few of them. And every single time it's because they have hired me because they think I can solve their problem, like Sanya said, whether they look at it in my portfolio or they heard it from somebody. Somebody else is like, oh, Shel did this stuff for me. And they're like, oh, Shel can do anything. And then, we're 4 months in, they haven't liked anything that I've done. They're burning money on the altar of miscommunication. And I can sense that we're going to hit a problem if we don't make it happen or bail. And I do the we should break up email. I do not return any money. They owe me for all the work I've done. But we can't, I am obviously the wrong fit. It's on me. It's me. I'm the problem. It's not you, it's me. Go away.
It's not you, baby. It's me.
Yeah.
I definitely want to touch back on like you firing clients, but I do want to hear chapter 2
Yes.
of Jason's saga.
Please, yes.
And then maybe from there we will then get into the more kind of conversational story prompts and open up to Q&A if anybody has any questions. But Jason, take it away, please. Oh, microphone.
People are probably wondering why I'm still with them. Well, not now, but at the time. Well, so I had a pretty good deal because I had creative control over my comic, and I was, and for each comic that I did, I was never paid a page rate, which kind of sucks because normally cartoonists would get paid a page rate, but I did get 200 copies comps of my comic, plus a 30% of the gross, not the net, but the gross sale. So I was like, that's pretty good. Especially when the first issue hit, where a lot of the speculative collectors like bought my comic. So that was a pretty sweet deal. And after my 2 years have expired, I was already going to the publisher. Let's call him Michael. So Michael, are you gonna prepare a new draft for me to sign? Something, and we verbally we were like, yeah, it's gonna be the same deal like I had before, and it's like, that's great. But he also said, oh yeah, but there's a lot of things that are changing because we got a celebrity who's gonna be our spokesperson, and there's gonna be some we're moving into expanding the publishing, so we are looking into TV and movies, and the celebrity was someone that was in a bunch of Judd Apatow films and co-starred with Seth Rogen a few times. So I was like, wow, this is very exciting. And it was great when the celebrity he even praised my comic a few times on social media, and I was being over the moon that this is great, and it did feel very promising. But the thing was, there was very few interactions that I had with the celebrity, and he's very Hollywood, so he has people in front of him that if you want to deal with having talks about business, there was a lot of filters. So it's mainly just talking with Michael, the publisher, directly about the next steps going forward. So we had to just go in good faith that he would honor the same deal, and the thing is, even with some of the things that went wrong, I still managed to I had to put up a fight, but still managed to get the money I was owed, and I still got my creative rights and stuff. So, it's that kind of saying where it's you gotta once you know that your demon or your devil, their weaknesses and stuff, just like you're used to it. So yeah, we were getting into the whole TV stuff, and the thing was, me being naive about, because like TV and movies, this is totally outside of our realm, because we're all in the comics industry, so there's a lot of things that I've learned firsthand, and luckily I've had some very faithful fans that were also in the Canadian TV industry that helped me um, in these next steps of, well, it seems like there's gonna be talks of a PHL, like a Pitiful Human Lizard TV show or a movie. So we're gonna let's prepare a pitch project, and we pretty much did this. Like like this was like a non-paying thing, but at the same time, that this is something that, yeah, like that's a no-no. Like this is like when you are working with a production, like they will pay you to do a pitch. So I was already doing some of the wrong things, and pretty much doing free work for this publishing company, who would already be prepared to go. Yeah, so we've already like made some talks with like CBC and these other production company studios. So we know we're in and out about like what goes on in these meetings, and they would want to take my pitch without me representing, like without me being in that meeting, and just have them represent my project. And I was already like, okay, I've already done the work for you guys, so no, like I'm gonna make sure I'm in that meeting because you got nothing else besides this. Um, and the funny thing is, like, I was already hearing from other friends in the TV industry that it's good to have friends and outside of your field, because I've heard that they were an embarrassment in like some of the CBC meetings, and they were also going to be partnering up with another production that already had all these that were already treating their actors wrong and the whole their production crew wrong. And I was like, no, you're not going to be in team with them. It's like, and they were like kind of throwing it off like Jason, the whole TV and movie industry has their faults. Like this is normal. And it was like, it's like I like they're like, if they're already creating buzz, like they're like the Canadian Weinstein, like I don't want any part of that. Like, so this is where the divorce between me and the publisher went. And the thing was, we didn't really have a contract with each other because we just went on good faith. So pretty much I just gave them a formal exit letter saying, okay, so this is where we stand. Like I've already honored my fair share of the agreement, like given you this much content, and like there are, and here's some of the times where you did not honor some of these agreements, and I'm willing to let go of all, like, even the thousands of dollars that you owe me, but let's just formally agree that that you don't have the rights to distribution and public and production of my comics again. And it was, man, very long emails, because especially when you create this unprofessional relationship with the publisher, where like you kind of like, we kind of felt like we were friends in a way at times when things were good, to the point where like it became like this really ugly divorce. I That's when I had to get more lawyers involved, and and you know, there is a comic lawyer that a friend of mine uh, put me uh, put me in touch with, and her name is Caitlin Damata. I'm just putting her name out there because she is a great comics lawyer.
You
However,
want to write her name into the chat for us, actually?
yeah, her name is Caitlin Damata, and she represents people like Chip Zdarsky, who's one of my collaborators. He's the one that put me in touch with her, as well as I think Ed Brubaker and maybe Matt Fraction, and I think even Jeff Lemire, like a bunch of big name people. And so like out of the goodness of her heart, actually, because she heard my story through Chip Zdarsky, she actually prepared like a formal letter to the publisher, like, yeah, this is that we're ending things. And then, you know, the publisher wasn't having it, but then the thing is, Caitlin can only do so much because she's based in the States. And when you're dealing with a Canadian publisher, you need to get a media entertainment lawyer. So luckily at the time, I was in touch with another production company that was interested in PHL. A very good production company that has a very good name when you ask around like other actors and writers. So he actually put me in touch with a really good entertainment lawyer, and I can I'll write it down once I remember it later on. And and that's when yeah, he pretty much like, you know, like I told him like I told him like all the things that happened, and you know what I want out of this, and he was like, Jason, you're being too reasonable, like you don't owe them anything. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's like, okay, so we're gonna give the carrot on the stick first. If you don't take it, they're getting the stick. And so like at the end, because they wouldn't budge, the publisher would actually, you know, they would actually say, well, as a matter of fact, Jason did already write this agreement that, you know, he signed on for 5 or 10 years, and it's like, well, no, I don't remember signing any of that. Like, I'm very careful with knowing what I've signed. So please show us what I've signed. And he was like, well, you did. And, you know, for months back and forth, it's like, where is it? Let me speak to, and then my lawyer's like, let me speak to your lawyer. Let me speak to your dad, pretty much, because it got very immature. Where it's like, no, like we got to settle this legally, and to the point where we're like, okay, if you're not going to cooperate, because knowing that we never got any word from their lawyer, it went to show that no lawyer would represent them, because they knew that the publisher had no case. So we're like, okay, well, here's a cease and desist letter, and you know, like the publisher threatened to say, well, we'll do whatever we want with it if you don't reply to our email. And it's like, well, I mean, here is the legal documents, and knowing that, like, if whatever action that you do, it's on your own accord, meaning if you do something stupid, we are going to act. So that really scared them off. So story, the moral of the story, I guess, yeah, really ask around for a good lawyer, and yeah.
I think it's also like important to know that before the messy divorce, this went on for years. Like, you were with them, and we all, a bunch of us, worked with them for years. They were in the comic community, and everybody had stories about them. And then everybody heard that this celebrity was coming in as this angel investor and was infusing cash. And there was a little bit of hope. Like, oh, well, maybe things will turn around. And then it just continued to break bad.
Yeah.
And I when you mentioned that, they had you working on pitch packages for movie development or movie pitches, and you were doing this work for free, it sounded like you were a little ashamed that, like, yeah, they took advantage of me. I didn't know any better, and I did this all for free. But you truly did not know any better, and it sounded like they were kind of big timing you, where like, oh, you might know comics, but you don't know TV. We know TV.
And I was hoping that, me doing the work ahead of time, I would be like, you know what? Me doing the work, I can already say that I'm earning my right to be the EP, the executive producer and the showrunner, because I'm doing the work already. And this is the pitch project. So meanings like if they want to like pitch that and try to say, oh, it's like they're trying to call it their own. It's like, no, like for another thing about the TV and movie industry is like when a company goes in with an IP, they have to make sure they have like a waiver to sign, knowing that they have the right to do whatever they want with that character, which they didn't, meaning that they actually were doing something illegal. So yeah, I was learning a lot of new things throughout this whole process, and thankfully, working with a really good production studio, like they actually like went with the proper steps of like, ooh, like I'm actually getting paid for like every single step of this. Like this is great, and like, and I still get to have these roles because yeah, like there were a lot of bad signs where there were like it was just me and a publisher and one of the editors saying like, Jason, you got to be prepared if your character is gonna turn like this, like my character is like this very downtrodden superhero, and they're like, you got to be prepared to make these changes where like he will have like like very high tech gadgets, and kind of like Spider-Man from the Marvel universe. And it's like, no, that's already been done. But no, like who's making these decisions? Well, you got to be prepared. It's like that was already a bad sign that they were gonna go in a room and pretty much let the third party do whatever they want with my character. And that from that meeting, I was like, no, I got to be prepared to take my character back. And yeah.
Absolutely. And with the idea of like, oh, you were learning a lot of things from this process. I think a lot of us learned a lot from that process because although I think this publisher did go out of their way to like, wine and dine some more established creators within the community, I think they also went out of their way to target young, new creators that don't know any better about their rights,
one of them,
or maybe don't know any better to consult a lawyer. And that's unfortunately very common, not even with this publisher.
Can I chime in on this as well, real quick?
Please, yes.
I mean, let's be honest, we're all on a little bit of a roller coaster of memories right now, just listening to Jason, who really went through the worst of it in so many ways. I only dealt with one project with this creator, with this publisher, but I still remember it as being one of the most like ridiculous experiences I ever had. And I bring this up because of what Megan just said about how they were looking for a certain type of creator. And, much like before, I was in the middle of my career where I had finally gained a little bit of experience, and I was only just starting to get work with like bigger name companies. So I think they really honed in on that. They gave me a cover to work on. And I remember I must have had like 50 messages back and forth on this single cover, on this single, weird niche detail that I just could not fix for them somehow. And their end comment to me was like, you're just not good at drawing this, And I'm like, oh, all right. So they had actually, I know, right? And so they had asked me originally to do 6 covers for them, I think. And as I was working on this, I'm like, I am never working with these people again.
No.
Like they don't know how to deal with their talent. They don't know how to respect and appreciate their talent, because I can make mistakes, and absolutely I can make mistakes that need to be corrected. But this was ridiculous. I had worked with I've worked with like every major publisher since then, and I've never had like 50 edits on a single illustration. That's just like unheard of. So I remember I emailed them and I very kindly told them, I'm really happy to finish this up for you and make sure it's just the way you like, and I'll be ending my commitment there. And we had not, again, there was no proper signage of things. It was all like, good faith or what have you. And I think they were shocked that I would walk away, because suddenly other members of the team started emailing me saying, we really value you, we really want you to stay on board. And I'm like, you guys seem like great guys, and I wish all the best for you, but this has not been an experience that makes me want to work with you guys again. And I think you have a little growing up to do as a creator. And my experience is just a microcosm of what Jason has been through with these guys.
I remember when you were going through that, where you showed us the emails they were sending you, and we were just scrolling and scrolling through all these edits. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you were worried that you were the problem and that you were the issue, and we were like, what is going on? So,
gaslighting wasn't a term back then, Megan. It was not a term back then. And you asked me once, like, do I get hired by people who expect me to do work that's like out of my wheelhouse, right? And I mean, I didn't think it was that far out of my wheelhouse. I've done a lot of, it was superhero work. I've done a lot of superhero work since then. I've written a lot of superhero work since then. But yeah, no, to have somebody kind of come down and say that, like, I'm dissatisfied, the publisher, after dozens upon dozens of rounds of edits because you apparently can't draw this properly. I mean, that's just seedy business. That's I mean, I can laugh about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, these things are funny in retrospect. It's just so transparently nagging, right? Like they want your work, they hired you, they are going to use it, but they don't want you to think that you're valuable.
Yes.
And it's like, just walk off a pier. Like, this is such infuriating thing.
And Shel, here, please, Jason.
Oh, the funny thing, like, those editors, some of them were like just fans of comics that eventually just kind of like kissed enough butts to get that job, or even like had no comic book background, like they were in the restaurant business, and so this was like brand new to them. So it's like it's really just their opinions. It's like it's not like objective to is this good marketable for as a comic. It was just mainly them, just their own taste in comics, just old man taste in comics. That's what it was.
Sounds like they were power tripping, and it's like, oh, we can be mean to the freelancer. That's fine.
yeah.
Exactly.
No,
and I think one thing for those of you who are up and coming creators as well, getting out into our industry, we're in a really unique period of time, because you guys have probably heard the term the Great Resignation. A lot of people are reconsidering where they are in their careers. And the funny thing is, we as artists, and we as writers, and we as creators, we are doing a job that cannot be done automatically. It can, no matter how much, CG you throw on something, you cannot get rid of creatives. Creatives cannot be trained at the drop of a hat. We start young and we develop over time to become what we are. So we are a very unique asset in the industry, and they know that, and that is why we will always be kept hungry. And look out for people who are trying to keep you hungry.
Yeah.
Because great publishers will acknowledge your talent and give you an opportunity, and it'll be a discourse when things are maybe going a little sideways. But yeah, know your worth.
Absolutely. And I think, Shel, go ahead.
I wanted to, because Megan brought up, like, that, companies are predatory. There are companies out there and clients out there that are going to be looking for people that are naive or new, and they're going to try to hire those people for their own discounted rates that they've made up. And that I've been in this industry a decade and people still try this on me. They don't actually know if you're new or not. Nobody actually knows how long you've been working. You can totally pretend you've been doing this for 15 years because they don't know. They're going to try it every time. I had a company that doesn't do anything in comics hire me to do a couple of comic pages as like a side story in a graphic novel they were producing. They're a big media company. They mostly make sort of documentaries. And in my sort of like video interview that they insisted on having before they hired me, the interviewer at the end of it was like, it's really wonderful to see, like artists doing this kind of fantasy stuff. Cause I know it's not like, I know it's not like a full-time job. So I know you're doing it from the love. And it was like, oh, the love. My price has just doubled. I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know if I look
pay the rent
like a baby, but like, buddy, that's not gonna fly. So yeah, double your rates when they pull that crap.
I'll never understand the narrative that we should not charge for doing something we enjoy. I mean, like, it boggles the mind.
It's like, oh, it's so fun drawing every scale on this scale mail 20 times. I'm really having a blast. I hope I can eat food this week.
Exactly. I mean, I love crowd scenes. Absolutely. I'll do them for free all day long.
Yeah.
Why not? My children don't need to go to school one day.
Let's rotate that car in 3D. That'll be a fun challenge for me.
Oh God, you gotta hate the edit, change the angle.
No, and I think you hit it kind of on the head as well, is that when you are dealing with a client, yeah, they don't know the difference. They don't know how long you've been in it. And it's a little bit fake it until you make it, where like you can conduct yourself however you like and they will treat you as such. So if you go in there with confidence and go in there setting boundaries and like, this is what I do, and if you need to say it, this is what I don't do.
Yeah.
They will they'll take it as is. But from there, I think we're going to move into, I wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions and get a little bit, just have a little chat, have a little conversation with all these horror stories, these horrible stories that I'm so happy that you've been able to share with us. The first thing I wanted to ask, and Shel, or I guess Jason had this situation with the publisher, but to Shel and Sanya, have you had a job where you noticed red flags right away, but you took it anyway? And maybe expand on why you did that, or maybe why you didn't do that.
Do you want to go first, Sanya?
I'm happy for you to go first, Shel, but totally up to you.
I mean, that job that I said, where they said the quiet part loud, and they were like, oh, we know that you don't do this as your job, but that makes it special to us. I doubled my rates. They paid me my doubled rates. It ended up being fine. And I really think that it ended up being fine because I doubled my rates. I think if I'd given them a lower price, I would have really gotten the bad end of the stick on that one, because they clearly thought they were working with someone who wasn't a professional. And I gave them prices that were not prices I would expect to get paid. I definitely was like giving them a rate that would end the conversation in my mind. And they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. And then they treated me very respectfully from there on. I think that you can sort of manufacture a certain amount of respect by picking a rate that's maybe a little higher than you think it should be sometimes.
You've done that a couple times. It's like this, I won't call it what we call it, but it's screw you rate.
Yeah.
Like, you seem annoying, so I'm going to give you my screw you rate. And if you take it, great.
And if you don't, perfect. That's actually this is what I mean about, like, I have baskets, many baskets. And so when somebody new shows up or some new possibility shows up, I'm looking for the red flags now. As we've discussed, we've all had enough experience to be really careful about them. And I don't need any one job as much as I need to keep doing jobs that are sustainable. So for me, a single client isn't important. For me, it's the quality of the work that I'm doing over time. So a job that is going to be infuriating has to pay enough to compensate for that mental health problem. Like, I want to take a week off after a job that makes me that stressed, right? I would like to get paid enough to take that week off without being any further stressed. And like I said, I really do think that people who seem to be disrespectful are people who don't fully understand who they're dealing with. And I don't mean that in like a rock star way, but just like they think I'm new, they think I'm ignorant, they think I'm from the outside of the industry. They ghettoize the content that I make. They think that I'm not experienced or I'm not a known name in their corner, so I don't count. Those people can be impressed by putting a big price tag on yourself. And it's really silly, but also it pays the rent. So I do it when I think I need to. And it is filter number one, right? For a client that like, oh, do you think I'm silly? Will you pay me twice what I normally charge? And
Pay my silly rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my silly rate. That we'll call it that.
Sanya, have you ever like taken a job where you saw red flags initially, but you decided to take it anyway?
Less and less with every passing year because, mental health is a conversation, and also a big conversation. We're in such a special place in our industry where people's personal IPs are being picked up and thrown into the stratosphere, to Netflix and to so many places. So there's more and more value in investing in yourself. So first and foremost, let me say that I have the luxury to make this choice. I'm in a 2-income household, so I have the luxury to make these kinds of choices. But there are times where I'll get a job and I'll say, I see some potential red flags here. Am I better off taking this time investing in me? Whether that's my health or well-being or just literally my content, self-development, all that stuff. But to speak just to the, I guess, like more positive side of things, I was referring earlier to a charity project, not charity project, but charity organization I was working with. And like I said, they had never hired an artist before. I mentioned them earlier in the conversation. That was an instance where I saw red flags, but I went for it anyway, because it was for charity, because they were clearly coming at it from a place of naivety. That's when, and they were receptive to when I corrected them and gave them some education on how to approach an artist, and I would happily work with them again. But I will say I do that. That was a very rare instance. Normally, if I see a red flag, it's a red flag, and I got better stuff to do at this stage of the game.
Absolutely. Jason, based on your experience with Publisher, I know you're doing a lot of work for hire and a lot of collaborative work right now. If down the line you decided, I want to do another creator-owned project where I am writing and I am drawing, and basically like I have the creative control to this project, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in terms of like how you set up the deal, other than just not going with that publisher?
I mean, so, like, especially when it comes to book proposals, and you got to make sure, like, if you're like a collaborator, like as an artist or writer, make sure you're getting like your 50-50 share of what you're going into before you head with a book publisher. I'd be willing to just put enough effort just to do like 8 pages, no more, for the book proposal, to convince to convince the publisher if it's good to be published or not, and yeah, like have like a good lawyer. Like once you have a good lawyer in your Rolodex, like you can go to them to look over the contracts. It's always good to actually, there's a lot of great comic lawyers right now, especially that would be willing to give some free advice. And some of them, like their handles, like one of them is like @comic lawyer. I forgot his name. I think his first name is Dirk. Let me just look that up. But yeah, Caitlin Damata is someone that like they're very open to give like free advice um, to a certain extent. So yeah, like just ask around. Yeah, Dirk Hanover is as Megan Kearney has mentioned in the thread is one of them, and Caitlin Damata are like one the two top comic lawyers in the industry that I can think of.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's absolutely great advice. Just like any contract that especially a large scale project, any contract you are going into, it doesn't hurt to just reach out to some lawyers to get their feedback. This is a question for all of you. What would you say are like the most common red flags you get? And I know all of you have like a different range of clients, so I think I'm very interested to see if there are different answers. But what are the most common red flags you see?
If they're associated, and this is a funny thing too. Like I was at Fan Expo this past weekend, and it's funny because I still like, even though I'm at the guest table, like, and I have like some of these Marvel books, but like there are these people that are scouting, like trying to just hire some creator own material. So like I've had people that like come up to me, propose like, to join their platform or whatever. And one of the red flags is if you know a horrible person in the industry and they're associated with that group, don't do business with them at all. Because if they're doing business with horrible people, like that's not the type of business you want to be part of.
Yep. I have a list of people in my industry, in video games and in tabletop RPGs, that are just sort of known problem people in the industry. And anybody that I see supporting or encouraging them or recommending them for things is somebody that is either naive and doesn't know what's going on, doesn't care when they're just callous, or they're literally in on the grift. So doesn't mean that they're actually a mean person, but it does mean that I can't trust them to have all the facts and to communicate all the facts. So yeah, red flag people are a map you make in your mind as you get into an industry, and it sucks, but you got to do it.
For me, I'm going to give a little bit of a weird one, but it's something worth keeping in mind. You have to be a little wary of people who approach you with their pet project. Sometimes it's a single person, sometimes it's a partnership, whatever it is. And these people have a really, really, really big idea, Game of Thrones, level stuff, but they've never executed a single thing before. And here's the red flag I'm talking about. The red flag is open timeline. Just whenever you feel like doing it. And it sounds really generous, right? When they approach you and they're like, yeah, just whenever you have time to work on it. Someone who doesn't respect their own project's timeline is never going to respect your timeline. And again, it might not come from a malicious place, but you're going to be paying for that regardless. So I almost never, ever take on any open-ended projects, because like, if I have a rate at which I expect to be paid and expect to, for example, pay rent and things like that, like if my time is just expanding indefinitely, like that rate is going down to nothing, right?
Yeah.
So, it's something to keep in mind. I also had another little one on the side, and now it's escaping me, but I will come back with my mini red flag after, when it comes back to me.
Awesome. One thing I'm very interested in is what would you say, and while I'm asking these questions, if anybody in the audience or in the chat wants to pipe up with some questions, now is a great time to start popping them in. But one thing I'm interested in is, what would you say are red flags that warrant proceeding with caution versus red flags that are like, I'm not even answering this email, like I can't even begin to proceed with this? Yeah, anyone who wants to answer that. So red flag where it's like, all right, my guard is up, versus no, I'm closing the computer.
I feel like Sanya brought up a very important point about people with their baby, their sweet baby, darling baby personal project that they've never done anything and they've been thinking about this for 2 decades. And anybody that sends me a cold email, I haven't met them, I haven't worked with them, I haven't worked beside them on any projects. We just don't know each other, and they have out of the blue contacted me. And they have their big, beautiful, amazing Game of Thrones scope project, and they want me to be a part of it. If they use language like joining the family, coming in on this great journey we're going on together, if they think that I'm going to come on at the same level of investment that they are emotionally, there's no way we are ever going to agree on things like, I just need to get paid and I do work other jobs and I'm not available all the time and I have a schedule and I don't actually care about this the way you do because it's your baby. And that is one that I think is like a walk away level red flag. And then like red flags that are more manageable are ones where people just are new and they're like, oh yeah, what do you mean? What rights? And they're asking, they're ready to learn. Like Sanya said, there's people you can educate, right? There's people who want to get better at working with you, and it might take time and it might not be something I always have the spoons for. And it is a red flag. You do want to notice it and make note of it. But there are times when it's totally fine. It's easy to work with them. They're not going to be angry about realizing that they were not aware of these things. They're actually excited to come in and get better at their job by working with me, which just like makes me sound like I think I'm really amazing. I feel like that's like my whole vibe here. I'm not. I'm full of insecurities, but you can't let the client see any of them. Oh, muted, Sanya.
Sanya, Mike.
Sorry. I want to quickly add just like a small addendum to Shel's very valuable comment there that if you want to diffuse that situation where you have the person with their baby and they've been working on it for 2 decades, but they've never actually done anything before, a great way is put the project back in their court. I.e., you see the red flag and you're like, wow, that sounds really exciting. My plate's a little full right now. Maybe you could put together all of your, put together the whole plot line back to front, have the whole outline for the series developed, have all the character work developed, have your contract ready. And when you've got that whole package ready for you, send it my way. It's not meant as it's not meant to be glib and meant to be insulting. It's just to get them to really think about what they're asking of another person. Oftentimes people get so excited about their project, they bring in an artist at stage 1 when they should be bringing in an artist at stage 50.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So pardon me, Shel, I wanted to add that on.
No, totally. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a red flag that sometimes we don't bring up enough is like emotionally charged language of things like, oh, you're part of the family. Oh, I can't wait to work on like my baby. Yeah. I had a client say like, oh, I really picture myself as the dad and you're the mom. And I was like, no, you pay me.
Sirens.
Contract. You just hired me. And again, it may not be, they may not understand what they're doing. They might not understand that this is a professional relationship and it should be treated as such. And sometimes that requires like, I don't think I'm a good fit, or maybe that requires some educating. But Jason, do you have like, well, I guess maybe the publisher, any red flags that look like that is a walk away, but are there any now that you're willing to look over, or?
Sorry, that was to me, right? Because
Yes,
I think it just got cut out for a bit, the first part. So, I mean, I'm very thankful that I have a full-time job that's unfortunately outside of comics that's mainly paying the bills. So I can be selective with the emails I get to the point where like and I get so many of them to the point where like I don't even answer them, or like the only ones I do answer are the ones that I know that I will feel passionate about doing it as well. And because I have said yes to like certain things where like it doesn't pay well, but it does seem fun, and like it's connected with people that are mutual friends with some of my other friends that I respect, and it's one of those things where it's like, sure, I'm kind of doing it for exposure, but I can afford to do it. If you can afford the time to do it, like, and you're having fun with it, those are those rare moments where you can say yes. Um, so yeah, like I have like accepted those kind of jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. Jay has a great question for us in the chat. When do you think it's worth it to make a story like A Client from Hell or like this known to others? If you have a rough time and want to warn others, when should you take that public, or should it be more public? So I'm guessing, like, what is like your comfort level, or when do you think is like, this is the line, they have crossed it, I am well worth burning a bridge over this?
So yeah, this can be pretty interesting because with the publisher that I was dealing with, it's like, there was a number of people that have shared their anger on Twitter, and I've heard horror stories of like, if this publisher could afford to buy to pay a lawyer, they could sue them or threaten them for defamation. And it's like, that's an ugly situation that you want to be in. So, for the longest time I've been pretty quiet about like not saying anything like on social media uh against this publisher, in fear of they will like get their lawyer at me and sue me for defamation. And yeah, like I've had like friends that were intimidated, a lot of like great friends that have been intimidated by that, and I didn't want to be in that situation. But until like, yeah, like there's times where like if you get a lawyer, like just settle it behind the scenes. Otherwise, I think the only good time when I think you're safe to you know, put it in full blast on social media. It's like, if you know you have a good support team that's out there that's willing to vouch for you, uh, do it. But at the same time, it won't. I mean, at least it will put it would spread the word that like the client is horrible, but legally it won't solve anything until it's in front of a judge.
Absolutely. Shel, what would you say about a situation like that?
I think that it's very rare that airing that kind of dirty laundry publicly is effective, and for a lot of the reasons that Jason just said, like, you are literally putting a target on your back. But that doesn't mean there's a lot of semi-public and private ways to spread it. Whisper networks can be kind of gatekeepy, and that sucks, but they are also literally a survival tool, especially for freelancers and people without job security. Talk to your friends in your Discord or your Facebook chat, or in person, in voice chats like this that aren't being recorded, in ways that are connected to your industry, but not necessarily visible to that client. So like I do think that comic conventions are a really, really big place to get into that whisper network and have conversations. I think that there are a lot of ways to just sort of like find somebody else that maybe has ever worked with them and talk to them before you go into that job, but also, talk to people that are coming into the industry. When you meet people at conventions or even on Twitter who are like, "Hey, yeah, I'm doing my first book with this person." You're like, "Yeah, who else have you worked with? Let's share stories. I sure have some." And like for me, if I see somebody coming into the tabletop RPG, I definitely have like a roadmap I would love to share with them that I cannot post on Twitter. Because it would put a very big target on my back, and I don't have the support system that Jason mentioned to like cover me.
Yeah, personally, I've never gone online to just burn a client, or done it like in a very public manner. But like as soon as something starts to smell with a client, I am in a Discord thread, be like, you wouldn't believe what I had to deal with. So absolutely, Whisper Networks. I joke about it a lot that comic creators love gossip, but it's exactly for this thing and for this reason. Sanya.
Well, I mean, I think you guys have like nailed it pretty much with what you've said already. Yeah, I mean, we love to gossip, you know, we really, really do. And also we are very protective of our own. So if you're a young creator, you can get in contact with almost anyone you see in this chat, and we will give you an honest, meaningful conversation about who we worked with and whether or not we think it's a great idea to work with them again. We are not like vindictive people by nature. You know, we love our industry, we love getting out into it, but we will try to protect, like, you know, our little ones coming up by letting them know what's going on. You know, just recently I worked with a creator and you know, we had, you know, as Shel mentioned, Whisper Network, and it was a new publisher I wasn't too familiar with. I was a little antsy about them. And then I got really great feedback from some of my peers saying that, no, they're legit. They're legit. They're a little strange, but they're totally legit. So yeah, you know, we are a small insular community, but not a vindictive community. We're here to help all our little people coming up.
I wanted to add that like you can fully go on Twitter and talk about the best clients you've had.
Yes.
At any point in time, and it is absolutely helpful to people who aren't in that Whisper network yet to be like, okay, well, this is a vetted client, this is a vetted client, this is a vetted client, and people I respect have said that they had a very good working relationship with them. So like we can't necessarily burn all our bridges publicly, but we can absolutely celebrate the trustworthy people in our industries and use that as signposts.
Yes. Absolutely. I think we'll end on this one, but Carolina comes in talking about freelancing. Tell me I'm not the only person that feels rage every time YouTube makes me watch Fiverr ads. 100p.
Yeah, it's so complicated because, like, on the one hand, I hate to see the erosion of rates in our industry. On the other hand, it's very hard when someone's needs to make rent. What do you say to it? You know,
yeah.
It's a complicated thing. But that's why we, as like the pros in our industry, who are at a certain skill level to produce certain things, have to keep our rates competitive. And I haven't changed some of my commission rates in ages, and I'm like, oh my god, I forgot about inflation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every year that you don't adjust your rates is a year you're giving yourself a pay cut, because inflation doesn't slow down for artists, so we don't live in a bubble from that.
I think Fiverr's a trap.
It's a trap. No, and I think that's why it's so important to have these kind of networks, to have these kind of conversations. Maybe not online, but whenever you get the chance to like have this kind of community to speak with each other about these experiences, because you know we joke about we talk about Jason's publisher and how everybody has a story about them, and because everyone was really excited to have a local publisher that was invested in Canadian comics, and so even though you heard bad stuff, you kind of hoped that they would change their ways, but because we all talked about it, because we all shared our stories, it meant that they couldn't get away with it for very long, and they've had to change names, they've had to hide their shame because they're so infamous. We had publishers like Tokyo Pop who were super predatory and super slimy and took advantage of new young creators for years who didn't know how to talk to each other. They didn't have the network that we have now. And there are still publishers that still pull this, who are taking advantage of creators, but because it's easier than ever to talk about these things with each other, it makes us all that much more powerful. Manuela, shoot us that one question real quick.
Quick.
While Manuela is typing out that question, I want to thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you giving your time and sharing these experiences, because we absolutely need these types of stories out there.
Thank you for having us. This was wonderful.
Do you guys want to also type into the chat where we can find your work, where we can see your work, and where we can find you online? Manuela says, I think it was Shel who mentioned that they have a list of stuff to ask about clients in that first interaction. So maybe Manuela is asking you to elaborate.
Yeah. So for me, when I get that sort of like cold email, or if somebody like tweets at me and like, oh, let's work together, and I say, please email me, because you want it in your inbox, you want it on paper, and you want to be able to find it again. And then I sort of come in and I'm like, yeah, I would love to give you a quote, but I absolutely need this list of information first. So money comes third or fourth on the list of conversation things. So like, what am I doing? What is it going to look like? How are you going to use it? Where is it going to be? Am I going to get comp copies or such? What are my limitations with the piece that I've made after I'm done making it? Can I resell it? Can I sell prints of it? Can I sell the original? Can I show it in my portfolio? Literally ever. Because in video games, the answer is kind of usually no. And then what is the content? And like sometimes I might, like I recently had a video chat where I was like, I need you to tell me like exactly what is going to be in this picture because it sounds really complicated, before I can give you a number, because I don't know how long this is going to take me. How many upside down horses climbing stairs, right? Just tell me honestly. But I think like that's a way to like break the ice and also be like, no, I'm thinking about rights usage, and I'm thinking about timelines, and I'm thinking about if you're going to repurchase this when you print this overseas or something like that, right? Like it's a signal that like this is a real job and you're taking it seriously. And also great filter.
Yeah, you're immediately, it almost like you want it to almost be a deterrent to like anyone who's not going to take you seriously.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. All right. Thank you guys again. Everyone say thank you to our guests for giving us their time. Michelle, I think Michelle accidentally raised their hand. We're going to have a talk next month with Michael Walsh, who will be talking about work for hire comics and working with editors on work for hire comics. Stay tuned to the Max Talks Eventbrite page, or the Max Talks Twitter. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you for being a wonderful host, Megan.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear from these experts as well.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to stop recording and we can end the call.
Stay safe, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.